Welcome everyone to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast. I'm a networking expert and the author of the upcoming book, No Strangers, How to Build Community, One Relationship at a Time. My why is the pursuit of mastery, and the goal of this podcast is to lock arms on a lifelong mission of daily personal growth to become the best version of ourselves. So let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome everyone to today's episode of the podcast. We are joined by a body intuitive, a self-love expert, as well as an entrepreneur. So welcome to the call, Miss Rosa Rago. Rosa, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, you're very welcome. Now, let's start by getting a definition for self-love so that everyone's on the same page as we start this call. What is self-love?
Okay, so what is self-love? Self-love, I would say, the best way to understand what self-love is acceptance. A lot of what I teach, when I teach what self-love is, I help to make sure that people understand that the starting point of self-love is acceptance. So acceptance is something we can achieve in a very moment. And as soon as we can just accept where we are, we've just started our journey of self-love. So even if we don't fully feel love for ourselves, there's so many parts to self-love. There's understanding, there is compassion. You know, when we start with acceptance, we experience love unfold into deeper understanding and that compassion, forgiveness, and gratitude. So self-love really just starts at acceptance, but it's a journey. It's not just one place.
And why is acceptance the foundation? Why would it be virtually impossible to find self-love without that?
Well, because when we are moving forward in life in a place of acceptance, we're coming from the context that there's nothing to fix, that there's nothing wrong, and that we're whole already. And so that we're coming from a place that is more about expansion and evolution. And so the context in every moment is that we're always feeling complete, or, because we're in a place of acceptance. And it allows us also to detach from the things that we sometimes feel like we need external, or something that we need to achieve in order to experience that self-love. So it's just important that we start with the acceptance. And there's you think about the infinity sign, and like love is infinite. So the best way to think about it is like love is the beginning, the middle, and the end. And in order to attain self-love, we need to actually start with self-love. We need to respond with love, and so we'll get to love. So really, love is something that needs to be present in every moment. And so acceptance is what really allows us to tap into that.
So, not everything is going to be perfect all the time in someone's life. So the message you're trying to get across is, regardless of the outside circumstances, you can still be whole and you are enough. And there's just external things that maybe you can make better or change or whatever. But as a whole, as a human being, you are already a miracle. You're already enough. Is that kind of the message that you're trying to get across with self-love?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's about really understanding that the truth is that nothing outside of us really defines us. And when we can truly accept that, it gives us the opportunity to explore what's available to us outside of the things that we attach ourselves to. So as soon as you can just let go of everything outside of you, all that's left is you and what's going on inside of you. And when it already shifts the focus inward. And then once we go inward and we really take on this journey of self-love and love and accept everything that's there, then it will actually allow us to then shift our circumstances outside of us. So ultimately, to just look at what's outside of us and start choosing whether or not we want to accept it based on circumstances that are just temporary, we're taking away the time where we need to be spending inside to actually shift the external, if that was clear.
Yeah. So what are some methods that can be used to dive deeper inside? I'm assuming meditation is coming, and your answer just reminded me. So I did a 2-day silent meditation retreat. So it was like 36 hours of meditation in a 2-day period. And one of my biggest takeaways is that um, myself alone in a room on a chair is enough. I am
Yes.
enough.
Yes.
And I guess that is the beginning of self-love. So where, what can people do to tap into to self-love and to dive in deep and get that foundation?
So it's important to know that all of us within ourselves, we already know that, because it's a universal truth that we are enough. And we actually all know that, whether we're awakened to it and actualizing it where we can live life through that is all a matter of consciousness. So as long as we can all understand that we already all know that, and it's really more so a matter of being able to hear and experience that truth. And our ability to experience and hear that truth, we need to live in the absence of the noise. And so you meditating, ultimately, if you think about it, meditation is just something that helps master or strengthen the muscle of being present in the moment. And when you're in the true present moment, you're not stuck in the future, in the past, you're not in the noise. And so when you can really silence that, what you'll hear in the silence is that you are enough. What you'll experience is that you are enough. It's a truth that already exists. We just can't experience it because of the noise. So it's actually our default. It's not something we have to create.
Do you have any advice for beginner, people that are starting to meditate for the first time? Is it, just do it for 5 minutes instead of trying to do it for an hour when you first start? Is it use a guided meditation so it helps to keep your mind focused? Any advice for the beginners that are listening?
The first thing I would say is that it's important that just because you practice meditation, it doesn't mean that you're going to benefit from it. So the first thing is that I would get the person's mind aligned with what it would take to actually receive the value of a meditation. So the first thing I would recommend for any beginner is to first be honest with yourself and ask yourself, do you truly believe that being still and finding your stillness is going to allow you to discover a greater part of you? Is it something that you're really enrolled in, right? Because meditation is like flossing your teeth. It's flossing your teeth doesn't make a difference each day, but in the long run, it makes a huge difference. And if we're not going to value and understand each time we meditate, if we can't understand that it really is an accumulation of constant moments of just being as present as we can, so that we're present for years rather than just a 5-minute meditation and then we're not present. If we can really just understand how important that is and get grounded in, you know what, I believe I'm enrolled in meditation, then you're already going to get results, okay? Because you're now grounded in the right intention. And then doing anything that resonates. I would recommend starting at least with 5 minutes, just simply to be able to implement the habit and the lifestyle. So then there's the habit and lifestyle. So even if you're doing it wrong, which you really can't do meditation wrong, you're grounded in the intention and in understanding the value of it. And you're focused on building a structure to help make it a habit, because consistency is going to be key. And then the actual practice in itself is really about what helps you the most. So some people find that they need something guided where they have to follow a voice that says, maybe it's a body scan. So find something that works for you. Some people feel like they can go in nature and just listen to water, and that can help them as well. So find whatever works for you to allow you to just focus on a given moment. You can also use an exercise where your only focus is your breath. So taking a nice deep breath in, holding your breath, and slowly exhaling, but that's all that's going on in your mind, and just experiencing that relationship with your breath until you're just present to the breath. So anything that puts you in that state is really all that matters. But it doesn't matter if you're not grounded in the intention and if you don't have a habit of doing it.
Is there a best time of the day to do it? Like when you first wake up or before bed, or it doesn't matter, just whenever you need it? And then does it matter if you're lying down or sitting? Should you be breathing in and out just from your nose or just from your mouth, or in one and out the other? Do these things matter, or it goes back to just the intention and being
It goes
still.
back to the intention to be still.
Hmm.
You really recognize the value, goes back to the intention of it, and it's whatever works for you. And there's so many techniques to be able to do it. There are some people who really need to move, have movement meditation, right?
What's
So,
that like? Like a walking meditation or?
well, just because it's almost like when you're lying down or sitting down or whatever, being in your stillness almost creates more loudness. And really, the goal is it's okay if it's loud as long as you have the ability to be able to be a witness of the loudness. If you're able to just watch the loudness, then that already is stillness, right? Because you're not in a state of control where you're trying to control the loudness. You're in the state of stillness within the chaos. But for some people, even that is so hard. That's why they need, say, guided meditation. I put people through a lot of guided meditation because they can listen to my voice and I can kind of interrupt and distract their noise, if you will. So I was almost lost my thought there.
That's
The
okay.
movement meditation. We're talking about the movement
Movement
meditation.
meditation.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So
That's all good.
what I find is that, when there's some people where there's too much loudness in the stillness, that they just need to first synchronize breath with some movements and get themselves focused on like calming the nervous system a little bit by kind of nurturing it and massaging the nervous system, because lying down, it's just like they're so wired because life and the way life is with technology and the stress, and now with the COVID, we're in a constant state of fight or flight. And so just to sit down with that in itself is so stimulating that we just kind of need to nurture and massage through stretching and movement. And then it'll relax us more.
When you mention being able to kind of take a step back, and it's okay that there's noise, but you have to be aware of the noise. It reminded me, are you familiar with Eckhart Tolle? I'm
Yes.
assuming. So I
Yes.
read, I think it's A New Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and he had the concept of there's the thought, but then there's the thinker of the thought. Like, you are not your thoughts. You can think about having thought about a thought, and it's that distance in between that has like the consciousness and all that. So that's what it reminded me of when you're talking about, there might be some noise, but if you can take a step back and see, be aware of that noise,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
important. Where did your journey of self-love begin? Was it a process? Do you remember a moment where you're like, I got to start loving myself, taking care of myself? How does someone become a self-love expert? How does this happen?
So, and just kind of to the last point before we move on to that question, I just wanted to say is that it's really important. What I've really learned through my journey in the last 13 years is that it's really important that we understand all that matters is the beingness, is who we're being and we are relating to who we are in any given moment. And so while a circumstance may seem like it's loud, if you can recognize yourself as the one outside the noise, if you can really identify yourself as the one outside the noise, and you can be towards the noise patient and present, and you can be stillness towards the noise, then in that moment you are in a state of stillness while coexisting with the noise that you're present to. Right. And so what that does is that it's more realistic to what's going on in life, that when we go out in life and there's things going on in life, we're looking at things that may seem chaotic, but instead of losing our ground, we can find ourselves being centered and still within the storm, if you will. So that's why it's important to understand that we don't make the noise mean something. We don't try to control it or try to fix it, because to be in a state of control or try to fix something that you think is broken or something that's wrong, that in itself, that beingness already is not a still way of being. If that makes that more clear. Now, as far as my self-love journey, man, there's like the depthful answer, and then there's the short, the medium, and then the short. But I feel like I need to give you more of a medium. But ultimately, in the discovery of the self-love journey, we will and we do come to discover that we always loved ourselves. We always have that. It's just how far we are from truly experiencing that in the moment has everything to do with how much we're holding on to. And so it's just important to understand that in what I'm standing in today, now that I know what I know, I recognize that I always loved myself. I always lived my life from a place of self-love. And what I mean by that is that the intention was always love. So it always started with love. However, naturally, this is kind of something that everyone goes through. We lose ourselves in the process based on the traumas and the things that we go through in life. And we start to lose our alignment to the truth that we are love and we are loved. And we lose that alignment. And then the whole point is really then to find ourselves again so that we can experience this love from like a conscious place, from a place of gratitude and consciousness and intentionality. And so for myself, when I started to awaken to who I was, there were things about myself that I saw, identities that were shameful or that I didn't like seeing. And instead of making myself wrong for it, I knew exactly where it came from and why it was there. I didn't even realize it was there until I saw it. And so I went through a phase of humility where I was able just to accept it, understand it deeply and where it came from, have self-compassion, then forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and then just a sense of gratitude for that discovery that ultimately had me more free and experiencing an even deeper sense of self-love. But to have gotten to that point, I needed to love myself through what I experienced. And so, so really it's just that ultimately when I went through an experience that was part of my calling, and maybe we'll talk about it later, that really transformed my life, I started to awaken to my shadows, if you will. I loved myself through it. And on the other side, I experienced a greater love. But there was never a point where I didn't love myself, or I didn't share that. It was just more a matter of I didn't know what I didn't know. Yeah. And then how I came to that self-love is that I started to help other people as a personal trainer. I was an athlete all my life. And in working as a personal trainer and starting to help people transform physically, it was obvious that what we were harboring and holding on to physically was limit and emotionally and mentally and just through our experiences, we were harboring it in our bodies that I couldn't even achieve the physical goals with my clients. It was clear that there was the whole being needed to be freed, if you will, and needed to be trained. And through conversations, through training my clients, I started to realize that as they got comfortable and they started to trust the space that I cultivated, that left them feeling safe, and they started to be more vulnerable and share themselves, I noticed that as they shared themselves, it was more about a perspective and how they were dealing with life, whether in any aspect of life, whether it was how they felt about themselves or maybe their marriage or their relationships or stuff like that. And as they started to share with me, I started to notice a contrast in putting myself in the situation and how I would deal with it, and really hearing how they were kind of going through it. And that gap exposed to me something that I could have offered as a suggestion. And what started to happen was, as my clients opened up to me, and simply just through the experience they had in the relationship that was contrasting to what they may have experienced even within their own relationship with themselves, it gave them the space to really get to know a different part of them. And it allowed me to really ultimately extrapolate a common trend, if you will, that I noticed, was that as most people start to discover parts of themselves and to see parts of their identity, in contrast to how I found myself going through it, I noticed that most people then will look at it and it would actually put them on a downward negative spiral. It made them feel more shameful, more regretful, more self-hate, more depression, more disempowered. And I started to understand when I asked them, what was it that had them experience that? It really came from a thought process in what they were making it mean and how they defined themselves and where they were seeing themselves, in life, and how they viewed themselves in the world. And it just kind of came about through conversations and working with my clients, until I worked with enough of people's challenges in the way that they worked and respond to life, that I was able to extrapolate, theories of what is self-love, what are the 6 steps to self-love, so that we can understand the process as we're going through it, and created a self-love workshop. And it just kind of started to evolve as my clients were able to just offer me their vulnerability, while I was able to, again, being able to distinguish the difference in the gap by using their story and meeting them where they're at, but bringing them to what I was standing in through the work that I'd done for myself, and develop steps for those who are experiencing what I found to be majority of people experiencing fear and a lack of courage to really work through to a greater love. Because it's not just as simple as like, love yourself and that's it, right? It takes courage, and it takes love ultimately, right?
Yeah, it takes courage to be vulnerable enough to realize where you're at, and to want to make the effort to get to that next place in your life. And you mentioned the 6 steps for self-love. Can you share those 6 steps?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure if if in the bio you share with a quick like summary of my background, but it's important to understand that when I was 22, I've been through a lot in my life, a lot of trauma. So by the time I was 22, it was my complete rock bottom. I was in Within a 2-year period, I was in 4 serious car accidents and 1 near drowning experience. The 4th one hospitalized me. I have a metal plate in my arm, and it was when I went out for a jog and I was hit by a car, and while I was in the States on a soccer scholarship. And that for me was life changing, and ended up being a blessing. That what really got me, what I really do believe was my calling. And so, what happened from that moment is that I couldn't work out as much anymore. And I actually had to do the opposite. I had to relax. My body was in pain all the time. I had to learn how to breathe and move again, like back to basics. And when I started to restore my body from the basics, with the motive to want to work out again, because that was what I was attached to still. So I was a bit in denial. Pain wouldn't let me push too hard, and I was focused, and I was forced to have to take on a different approach that was more relaxing and more of just coming from just breathing and slow movement. And when I did that, it started to do something to my mind. It started to, without me trying to be on a path of self-love. I got into this car accident and I had to move again. So I was forced to awaken through healing my body. And what happened was I started to access random memories of my childhood, from the traumatic childhood. Some were positive memories. Sometimes I was emotional, but there were no memories, but I just had a random emotions. But many times there were memories that would pop up while I was just doing basic rehab, physical rehab, like rehabilitative exercises and breathing. And as I started to do that, I started to notice that I was feeling lighter and I was feeling happier and better. And people are like, what are you doing? Like, and I was just like, nothing. I actually haven't been training at all. Like, I'm frustrated, but I've been crying like a shitload and I've been going through a lot. So it's like, but like internally I was feeling better, but on the outside I was like, what's going on with me? And I really didn't understand what was happening. But 2 years into doing this, going back and forth, I started to, again, starting to stretch and work on my body. And all of a sudden I made a connection of every time I went into my body and really got deep into my body, these memories would come up, and I started to make the connection. And when I made that connection, at the same time, coincidentally, there was a book called Anatomy of the Spirit that crossed my path that week. And I had a friend who said, Rosa, you got to read this book. So I read this book, and it's called Anatomy of the Spirit. And it talks about how we store our emotions in our body. And at the time for me, I was like, oh my God, like I thought I was going crazy, but it totally validated. I'm like, this is exactly what I'm going through. And so it wasn't something that I was seeking. I wasn't on a path of self-development. I wasn't looking for anything. I was already in a state of acceptance, but on autopilot, and was just harboring stuff from my past and I didn't even know. And I started to recognize what was happening. I started to go on this journey, and I started to discover all these parts of me. And as I started to release them, I started to show up naturally, lighter in life and more inspired and more like myself. And as I was going through that process, what I noticed was what I was going through relative to what I was helping my clients with, because I started to get them involved with meditation and breathing to help discover. What I had noticed is that when I started off first with, when these memories or these things would come up, I thought first to start off with just acknowledging the fact that they were there. And that's the first thing I did. I didn't become afraid of it. I was like, like out of curiosity, like that's weird. Why'd that memory come there? And whether the memory was a positive memory or a traumatic memory, I just really just accepted it. It's like, well, I know what happened, but I didn't harbor any resentment, or seeing it didn't make me relive it. I was just acknowledged it and I accepted it. And once I accepted it, what happened was I started to notice that I started to get more of a deeper clarity and understanding of myself. So this is what was naturally happening. And then once I started to get a deeper clarity and understanding, and I gained that clarity, I felt self-compassion. I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know that I was sabotaging relationships or being this way because of the trauma that I went through, that made me this way unconsciously. And then I did, sabotage, and I just didn't know. There was no point of regret or making myself wrong. It was just simply, I acknowledged it, accepted it. Through that, it gave me the ability to be within enough to get a deeper understanding and clarity. Through that clarity, I was able to have this self-compassion for myself. And then after the self-compassion, it was like a no-brainer to forgive myself, because it's like I didn't know any better. And after that forgiveness, I felt a sense of lightness, and I actually felt grateful for discovering that, because then I had more clarity moving forward in life. And so when I noticed that constantly with every memory that would come up, again, I would acknowledge, accept it, and then I would have a deeper sense of clarity and understanding, self-compassion, forgiveness, and gratitude. And I kept noticing that happening. And so when I worked with my clients, what I noticed that most people struggled at the point of acknowledging and accepting. So they can never access the clarity and the understanding, or the self-compassion, or the forgiveness and the gratitude. But what I noticed that they would say, I'm trying to forgive, I'm trying to understand, it's like, I realized you can't try those things. Those are things that are naturally available to you once you've accepted. And so when I teach my students in the program the 6 different steps to self-love, I make sure they're aware that you actually only have the conscious choice for 2 of them. The other 4 is just a result of. So our only job is just to acknowledge and accept, and that's it. And when you can really truly get present and get really grounded in acceptance, you'll notice that what experience is available for you is the understanding, the clarity, the compassion, the forgiveness, and the gratitude. That just happens naturally. And so that's kind of how it evolved for me. It was just really the discovery of myself, then offering this to other people and seeing just how much it transformed lives. And it's been a very basic, method or process that I've shared that's worked 100% of the time. But when I teach the acknowledgement and the acceptance, that actually, for many people, is an 8-month process. To learn to actually truly achieve acceptance in itself is 8 months. And that's because 8 months, we're going through a grieving process, and the last stage of grievance is acceptance. So there's a process to that grieving to actually finally achieve and experience that self-love through acceptance.
That's amazing. I was so in the zone for that whole thing. Look how crazy this is. Okay, hold on, give me a second here. Where is this? So, anatomy of the spirit. So look at this. So when you shared that, one of the things that you do, you're a body intuitive, and so I'm thinking my only reference point with a body intuitive is that 8 months ago, I read Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mace, which
Mm.
is the one book that you just said that changed everything for you. So it's such a weird, right?
Wow.
So the one, we're both on the same exact book that kind of
Yes.
started that journey. So that's it's kind of a, either it's a coincidence or it's no coincidence at all. Who knows? But
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, that's a good thing. I'm glad that that's crossed your path, because it's definitely a book that I think that many people need to have it's a foundational understanding of, for sure.
it's unbelievable. I had no idea that when you have, pain in certain areas of your body, that it has to do with the different chakras. Like I knew nothing about chakras, and
Mhm.
I had a lot of pressure at the top of my shoulders, and then you go in the book and it goes, if you have pressure at the top of your shoulders, it's most likely because of this, and you're like, oh my god, this is so
Yeah.
crazy. So
Yeah.
so I I don't know if you can see, but I'm highlighting. Literally, it's like every page is highlighted.
Amazing.
Uh, it was a life changer. So I was actually in Mexico. Um, I was in Mexico for about a month, and I was just working on personal growth and yoga and meditation. And that was the book that I was really studying while I was there. So
Amazing.
uh,
Awesome.
that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say too is that what I found with my own personal journey is that I started to experience it by accident, which is what I think opened me up to the experience at a rate where I didn't find myself getting in the way. And what I find is that what's important is that when we learn about, the emotions that we store in the body and everything, what I have found is that many people will go and search for their body, and they're like, oh, we start to go in and try to make things mean, and what do these things mean, because now we understand. So it's so important is that while we learn all of this stuff, is that if it's not something we've experienced, or not validating an experience we already had, to not put extra meaning on it, but just to simply understand that it's there, and then to move forward in life, not, I guess, not putting too much meaning, because we have to be in a place of detachment. So I don't know if you find yourself looking for anything, or if it's just something that, all of a sudden your shoulders are hurting, you're being with it, and then it kind of, the answers coming is available to you. But if you go looking in the book and what it means, what it will do is it'll actually take away from the integration or the discovery that comes from inside. So before looking at the meaning, let's just say you have shoulder pain, try going and just being still with the shoulder pain and working with it, and see what comes to you and what you discover, rather than looking up the meaning right away. That's something I would challenge you on, and then message me later or something and tell me if you notice what comes to you. Like, journal what comes to you.
Okay.
It's a great
Awesome.
way to practice our ability to listen to our own inner guidance, kind of thing. And then when you read stuff about what it means, it almost validates what you already knew, right? So
So the shoulder stuff, it was happening like every day. I would wake up with it for, I don't know, 6 months, and I wasn't in the best space. And then I don't know, the last 7 or 8 months, everything's awesome. I'm in a great space, and I haven't had any of the shoulder stuff and the upper back stuff. So,
and you never made the connection, or you don't know what changed or anything?
um, it's I think it's just like the pressure that I put on myself, and not having clarity on what I wanted and my vision for the future, and not feeling a sense of congruency with what's going on, and living small, and just all these things. So I don't know, I'm
Okay.
35. I don't know if it's like a 35-year-old crisis, life crisis. I don't
Yeah.
know what it was, but yeah, it disappeared as I got my life together. So I feel
As you
like
took action.
I was storing something, like my frustrations were stored in a specific area, or
Yes.
something like that. So for the people listening to this that are hearing body intuitive for the first time and have no idea what that means,
Mhm.
how do you describe what that is to someone that's hearing it for the first time?
So body intuitive is that it started off first with just what I discovered with my own body. Again, I went through a process of healing my own body. I went to physiotherapists and I got treatment, but I was told I wouldn't be able to raise my hand over my shoulder and my arm would never be the same. And I actually evolved to the point where I was able to do handstands. I couldn't even do handstands even before I got in a car accident. So I ended up getting to a point where I really mastered my body and discovered things on a deeper level that I couldn't um, achieve or accomplish with even going to rehab and trying to physically rehabilitate my body. And in doing that, I started to experience things that they're quite personal, but I could share is that I just started to experience visions and I started to experience, I would see colors, but I started to experience visions of the body. And in university for the degree that I was in, part of our degree was to take a course where we worked with cadavers. So I have a deep understanding of what's kind of going on inside the body as well, because I got to study off of cadavers. And it was my program was quite extensive with anatomy. So visually, I understand the body as well. Then I had to go and work with my body and heal it. And I started to connect with visions and started to see patterns. And in these patterns, I started to discover and connect them to emotional energies. And as I discovered that for myself to help release the emotions that I had within me, I started to see things when I worked with my clients and their bodies through the physical training. And I started to see the body not just as a physical body, but this vehicle that was carrying stories and life experiences. I could actually see how they were holding themselves and what their body was telling me. And by using what I knew about the body and what I knew about personal, strength training and what I saw with my visions, I started to help restore my clients and help them to feel more of a sense of alignment by helping to, or by basically using what I was seeing and experiencing with the body and just intuitively working with the body to help allow them to experience this release, this emotional release. And my clients started to notice a difference in what they were feeling, I just started to get a lot of referrals. And then I had like this big wait list. I was working at Good Life, and then I literally had to start my own company, and it all happened so quickly. But I really started to have like a claim for fame of like a body whisperer, this, someone who performs spiritual surgery. Like I started to adopt all these nicknames. But really it was almost like I could see the body, and I would describe it like someone who's obsessed with cars, like a mechanic who can tear down a car right down to like the, single pieces and reassemble a car. Like I just became so obsessed with the body, or someone who's obsessed with building homes. They can start from scratch and build a whole home. I was able to tear down a body and rebuild it in a way that had an impact on someone's awakening process, if you will. And it was all in what I discovered in when I started to connect with my own body, and I started to put my mind and my body to start to feel my body again, because I was numb to parts. And it was actually shortly after, like 5 or 6 years after this experience, where something came out from a Dr. Joe Dispenza.
I love
And
that guy. Just got into him recently.
as a chiropractor, he went and got an accident. He put his mind in his vertebrae. And as he put his mind in his vertebrae, things started to happen. He started to shift. And I was like, oh my God, that's what happened to me. Totally. And so what happened is that I couldn't even move. I was in pain. I literally just started putting my mind in my body and seeing the anatomy and just focusing on really connecting the mind and the body. And then it started to become more about movement. Then I started to see things. So it did something to my mind that really awakened me. So I only just really applied this to a more mindful approach of training with my clients, and it started to do the same thing to them. And then through their awakening, they would share kind of their process. And that's kind of where I was able to create my methodologies that I now can give to people as like a step-by-step. It's like, connect to your mind and body. It's going to awaken you. And then steps to self-love and how to love what comes up. Connect your mind, body. Here are your steps. Connect your mind, body. And essentially you go on this journey where you heal yourself through the love that you give throughout that process to yourself. So you become the product of the love you give to yourself. And yeah.
Does self-love come naturally to you now, or is this still a process, a daily process of you have to work on it every day?
Mhm.
Well, you got a mug that
Um,
says love, so that's a start.
yeah, Jeremy got it from Jeremy grabbed me a mug because I needed a water, and he specifically got this very detail oriented. And he's like, "Well, you're gonna get interviewed for being a self love expert. You should have this cup." So,
That's a
um,
keeper at
yeah,
Jeremy. There you go.
these are the kind of gifts I get from my clients, though. Um, so what was the question? Sorry, the question was,
So
oh,
does
it's more
self-love
natural
come
for me.
easily, or is it something you
Yeah.
have to work on daily?
Well, here it's all relative, right? So it's no different like working out a muscle. And so there's a point where you're really trying to gain results where you're going to have to really work at it. And it's uncomfortable at first, especially if it's not a habit. And so with anything good in life, whether it's a relationship, starting a business, starting a new workout plan, starting self love, there's always that phase where the reason why we don't stick to it or achieve our goals is because we can't get through the beginning phase where we have to work out the kinks and really practice willpower to integrate this new way of being, right? And so at first, it really just requires that. But just like training a muscle, at some point, you can weight train less to maintain the same muscle. And once it's integrated as a habit, it becomes something that's less resistant that you just do naturally because you're in the result of it. And it almost becomes something that you want to do. So would I say that it's easier and more natural? Absolutely. But it's not like you can stop loving yourself and it stays. You still have to practice it, but it becomes an unconscious way of being. It's become an unconscious pattern that you've integrated, right? It's like you're brushing your teeth every morning. It's just a pattern. It's just a new habit you pick up. So it's definitely becomes easier, especially after you kind of get over a certain hump of um, really healing your traumas, most of them. I mean, there's always a discovery, but it's like when you really get to that point where you just kind of went over the hump and now really is just about living as who you've discovered yourself to really be, and in that being that in that actualized process. But discovering love is infinite. It's always something that you never get there, and it's always a journey. So
I see all these books behind you. So how important is personal growth for you? And do you have any book recommendations, whether it's personal growth or just any favorite books?
yeah, absolutely. So man, reading is so important, and but more important than reading, having a passion to really constantly grow and being a student of life is key, because life is like school, and we're constantly needing to learn, but we're always in practice. We're always being challenged by life and needing to apply certain skills that we ultimately weren't taught with maybe our parents who maybe didn't know any better. So it's a responsibility, I think, to make sure that we're constantly keeping ourselves educated, um, and but most importantly, I read books because I'm passionate about growing. And so that passion really drives me to reach out for books in any area of my life that I want to master. So if I'm in the area of, wow, understanding more about me and my emotions and how they're connected to chakras, and I start to experience all these things, to gain a deeper understanding of a deeper truth of something that already exists based on what I'm experiencing, I will go and read lots of books around that. Um, and so I also find it's important to learn about financial literacy because we live in a physical world, and I think it's just important to understand to have a healthy relationship with money, um, and also around fitness and health. So these are all areas of books that I have. Like I have fitness books, nutrition. They're all my passion. Anything around finances, and then anything around learning more about chakras and energy and all that. And the books that I would recommend for sure is Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Yep.
Anatomy of the Spirit. These are like the books that I recommend in my program as like foundational. So Rich Dad Poor Dad, foundational. Anatomy of the Spirit, foundational. And any book about learning the basics of anatomy. We all need to have an understanding of anatomy, because, and the reason why is because to master anything, we need to know it well. And I find that a lot of us, we go and work out and use the body, but there's so much about the body that we really need to understand. And I think that it's downplayed, and there's more damage that we do than good, that actually affects us on an energetic level, that I find is not taken as seriously, to be honest. So
When I would work out hard at the gym and then I would go to hot yoga, they would say, "Oh, great, we can help undo all the damage you're doing at the gym while you're at hot yoga," which is kind of
yeah,
funny.
yeah.
How important are mentors when it comes to finding success in any industry? And did you have any mentors that poured into you to help you get where you are today and help you
Mm.
become the person you are today?
To be honest, I feel my whole life I had the best teachers and coaches. So I had an upbringing that wasn't very safe. Don't get me wrong, a lot of love in my family, like a lot of love. But just, that, old school mentality that was very fear based. And I did go through, physical, mental, and emotional abuse in my upbringing from when I was young as 4 years old, and my parents divorced and filed bankruptcy. I went through a near-death experience. So I went through a lot of things in my life that was quite traumatic. And I I used, instead of turning to drugs, I used my academics and my athletics as a way to be more in control, if you will. So I became an overachiever in school and athletics. And because I was so present in school and I did so well in school and in my sports, I developed a really good relationship with my teachers and my coaches. And I was always encouraged and acknowledged by them, and just to give an idea, like my grade 7 teacher in elementary school, 17 years later, went finding me, she went looking for me and told me she'd been looking for me for 2 years. And so I actually, all my life, was just always surrounded by what I believe the best teachers, the best coaches. And little did they know what I was going through at home. So it was kind of like my saving grace. And for soccer coaches, I had an amazing soccer coach as well. And it was the little tidbits that they would teach me as an athlete that always resonated more deeply. And so, and then I played for the provincial team, and I trained on a national level. So the caliber of coaching was always more than just the sport, but it was more of a mindset. So I really feel like I had the foundation of that. And, but other than that, I never really had a mentor. I went through this near-death experience at the age of 22. And it wasn't until I was 35 years old, which is now, I got to where I got to because of what I've achieved, but I took a lot of courses to learn more. And it wasn't until 35, which is now, that I actually invested in a mentor to help me to create the systems and to create and to expand my business in a way that can really support something that I have that has been very valuable for 13 years in helping people transform their lives. It's more of what I need, a mentor in supporting who I've been able to discover myself to be, right? And I've noticed a huge difference in just the learning curve. I find that mentorship is important, but it's important that we also allow ourselves to go through in their 20s, like make as many mistakes as possible and just learn by doing. And I feel like I always had I had a good head on my shoulders. I wasn't, I made the right decisions when I made the wrong decisions. But by the time I, again, was in my 30s, I was kind of plateauing with knowing how to truly expand myself. And that's kind of when I started to invest in a mentor to help me with. So I really do think it's all a matter of how many healthy role models you have in your life. On the other hand, I know someone in my life who had no support system, who was part of gangs to gain that support, and teacher coaching experience was all negative. And so they invested in a mentor when they were in their 20s, and that's what saved them, right? So I think that the investing in the mentorship really is as a matter of what your support system looks like, but at some point we all need it to take something to the next level.
Yeah, I think mindset is so crucial because if you find someone with the right mindset, someone that's successful and they have an amazing mindset, you could take that person, you could drop them in a new city, give them a little bit of time, and they're going to get right back to where they were before because
Yeah.
they'll find the right people, they'll find the resources, they believe in what they're doing, they have a vision. So I think
They have trust in themselves to make the decisions, and they also trust in themselves that if they make the wrong decisions, to learn from them and to be resilient, and and to come out of it.
do you have a morning routine that gets you started on the right foot every day and gets you in a peak state? Can you share if you do? I feel like you're someone that has a morning routine.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? I'm not a very structured person, but I do have a morning routine. And what I mean by that is currently the flow has been, it's more just something that I just kind of am drawn to. So I'm drawn to when I wake up in the morning, I'm drawn to get in the car lately in the past, I'd say month and a half, to get in the car, drive over to the lake and sit on the rock and just be with the water and just do a short little meditation. And that's what I've been drawn to doing the past month and a half. But before that, it was more so that I was drawn to do a meditation on the floor, on a yoga mat on my bed, right? But I always start the day acknowledging myself, acknowledging, my breath and just getting really present. And I always end the day that way, always. And it really is because there's such a contrast when I don't, that it's a no-brainer to be drawn to wanting to do it. Like when I don't do it, the day is so different. That Yeah. So it doesn't feel like a routine, like I have to in a very structure, but it just happens in my flow to be that every morning and night I'm really drawn to doing it.
Hmm. Now, we've been in a period of self-isolation for the last 4 months or so, COVID, global pandemic. Um, it's been a challenge for a lot of people, and you know a lot of people with mental illness. It's been really difficult. Do you have any advice for someone that has mental illness issues, and right now that self-isolation is pretty difficult? Do you have any advice to help them through this period of time until things go back to normal, whatever that new normal is in the future?
Hmm. Yeah. So what I would recommend is, number one is to be okay with asking and reaching out for help. I think what's most important is that we experience a space where we feel safe, and we feel safe in our vulnerability, and we're in a space of trust. If we can create these experiences for ourselves every day and start allowing ourselves to resonate with a little bit more trust, a little bit more safety, to be vulnerable and to let out whatever is there, I think it'll help us to release a little bit more, um, and to get out of this prisoner, mind, if you will, by just creating that space. And I find that it's difficult for some people to create it for themselves, because normally that's what I would recommend. But maybe just doing meditation and getting comfortable with that isolation might be a bit much at first to start. So if anything, to reach out and to know that there are so many resources out there. And then the other thing I would say is, if they have the strength, but they do, but if they recognize that they have the strength, to focus on getting outside of the mental illness and being open to get outside of it, and to look at it and to accept it, like just to acknowledge and accept it, and to be okay with it and get comfortable with it. But I find that might be a difficult concept to grasp, which is why I would say to reach out with first, to someone who I feel can help create that experience of just accepting, like not fighting it. And that'll allow them to be able to stand in something outside of that situation. There's something that is miraculous that happens the more we can step outside of our situations and what's kind of going on. There's an experience that we end up having every time we do that. And so that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I've heard some good advice once that said if up here isn't a safe space, right now, or you're going through a lot of stuff in your mind, that you should try to get out of your mind and into your body. So I know
Yeah.
you're all about the fitness and all that. And it's like, if you can get out there for a walk and get fresh air and get the juices flowing, that you get some of those positive, good feeling chemicals flowing through you, that a lot of times it's that you're stuck in a space. It's just you and your mind. And when your mind's not right, it can be the scariest place on earth. So
Yeah. And I think too is that when we create a safe space with our mind, we don't have to ignore it and go off and go feel good. Although I would highly recommend that. We could just work on getting to know our mind and what is it really saying? What's it really afraid of? It's, give it a chance to fully express itself. And rather than making it wrong or making it a bad thing or being afraid of what we're hearing and seeing, but just really practicing that compassion and that like acknowledgement. Like, think about it for you. Okay, Joel, let's just say you're in a situation, or have you ever been in a situation where you had so much in you and you just needed to express, and someone else just like acknowledged, just listened and had no opinion, and you just felt better for them just listening?
yeah.
Right? And if you've ever experienced that, you would experience that it's like an immediate healing as soon as someone can just give you the space to, even if what you say could maybe be wrong, if you will, they just don't make you wrong. They've just given the safety for you just to vent out or to say what you have to say. And it allowed you just to experience that. Thanks for letting me just say what I had to say. It's really about that. Whereas imagine you had to express everything you had to express, and then someone was like, oh, I just don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm going to go run off and have fun without you. You'd be like, I matter though. Why not listen to me? Right? So I feel like it's also important to understand that we don't have to just think that we need to get to a positive place right away, but it's a positive thing to be able to look at what's there and be okay with it and just acknowledge it and let the emotion know that it's allowed to be there. It's okay if it needs to be there, and just hear it out. And the emotion itself will feel a sense of nurturing of someone cares and I matter.
I have an uncle that goes for months at a time and lives in the woods like he's some crazy bushman. And he was saying stories where, he's out there alone, and out of nowhere he just has a negative thought about something from childhood or growing up, and he stops and he goes, okay, hold on, there's nothing here to trigger this. Like, there's no other person that said something to me. There's nothing going on except me and my mind right now. Why did that pop into my head? Why am I now 50 years later thinking about this one negative thought? And that allows him to dive deeper of what is still in here. Like, what am I holding on to? So that you just reminded me of that story. I haven't thought about that.
Rather than that fear is there and run off and go play, it's like it's still going to be there. It's like a child that needs to have a conversation, and you don't want to neglect that, right? So it's definitely, that's an awesome story. Thank you.
You mentioned that along the way, as you develop skills and you now have something to offer others, that you started your own businesses. You're also an investor in different projects. Where did this entrepreneurial spirit come from? Is that something that just came naturally, or you just found that you had something to offer?
Well, actually, I had my father was an entrepreneur. So growing up, all I was exposed to was just like my parents, who were always in survival and just always in that entrepreneurial mindset, if you will. And so that was number one, my upbringing. I never saw parents working like a 9 to 5 job or anything like that. And also too, while I went through a lot when I was a child with my parents, one thing my parents always provided us was opportunity. So we were able to practice just anything is possible all the time. Like, my mom was the mom that literally drove me and all my friends everywhere. Like, I was regarded as, for my friends, as someone who's just so unrealistic, because I always was like, anything, okay, we can do this, we can make this happen. Even if we had plans to go somewhere and we're like, oh, we won't make it. I'm like, no, guys, we can still make it. So I just always had this, I was always in a place of possibilities, always. It was just as long as I wanted it and I was I was clear to me, then it was just a matter of making it happen. And so I think that's just been a mindset that I've had for a while, and also growing up with an upbringing where my parents never really worked that job, so it's all I actually knew. Um, and when I graduated from university, I mean, I had the grades. I did my internship at the hospital because I wanted to go to med school because I was passionate about health. But the internship at the hospital, working with people at the hospital, made me realize, like, I want to prevent people from getting to this point. So I literally graduated 5-year degree, graduated with honors, and went back from the States back home and became a personal trainer at Good Life. And because it was never about, it was never about money. It was a matter of a mission. Like, I have a mission. Like, I want to cause world peace. Like, I was always connected to this, anchored myself in this mission, that it was never a conversation of, can I do it? And it unfolded as constantly coming up with new ideas and ways to deliver what I knew I could help people with. And so I had to build a business around that. So
what are the challenges and benefits of being an entrepreneur for those that are just Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, have never thought about being an entrepreneur, don't know any other way of life?
Yeah.
What can you share with your experience?
I would definitely say that a challenge for any entrepreneur will be directly correlated with how well you know yourself and know who you are, what you stand for, and what your true purpose is. When for myself, it grew so organically. I was never driven to have my own business. Like, that was never really a thought of, I want my own freedom, I want this. It was more like, I just was convicted and confident knowing what I could offer. So that was number one. So that's going to be a challenge, is that you really need to know your value. You can't be an entrepreneur seeking value. You have to be an entrepreneur, you really have to, the challenge is to really be grounded in knowing your value. And then it's just a matter of problem solving the best ways to offer that value to the people that will benefit. So it really takes you needing to know who you are, what you have to offer, what your true purpose is, so that you can, entrepreneurship or entrepreneurialism or entrepreneurship, I don't know what you would say, it requires consistency, perseverance, resilience. And the only reason why you're going to be persevering and resilient is because you're grounded in that mission. And it's coming from a place that is authentic, and it's a strong foundation. And so that's what I would say would be the challenge is, your business or who you are is your brand, and you are your brand ultimately. And there is a direct correlation with the expansion of your business and the expansion of your own development, right? Because it takes a certain beingness to really be able to sustain and to maintain a lifestyle of being an entrepreneur, right? It's technically not safe, or it could feel like it's not safe. Now, the pros to it is pure freedom. You get to be in alignment with what you stand for. You get to do what you love. They're your rules, your schedule. Like, man, the benefits are just, I've never worked a 9-to-5 job, so I'm actually just speaking from a place of what I love about like being an entrepreneur. And it's like the sky is the limit, and you can do whatever you want. Again, as long as that you fulfilled on the challenges, and you really feel clear about that.
So between your multiple businesses, between the investments that you have multiple streams of income. Why is it important that everyone has multiple streams of income, which is, it's kind of a guard against things outside of your control, like COVID, where your one source of income can be taken away, and it can be outside of your control. It can have nothing to do with how hard you work or the skills you've developed or the amount of value you offer. If you work a regular job, that's your only source of income, that can be taken away, as we've seen recently. I have a mentor, you've met, Mr. Byron Nelson. He likes to say, if you have multiple bills hitting your bank account every month, you should also have multiple streams of income to offset them. So what are your thoughts on multiple streams of income versus one?
I think having multiple streams of income, believe it or not, is like a form of self-love. And I think that, creating a stability in your life is a form of self-love, is about taking care of your needs and the means that require, like we require to be supported so that we can be our best selves, because we all have a gift and we all have to be able to offer that gift. Like, that's what we're here for. And so what I find is that our ability to serve and to offer our gift is compromised when we're not able to just take care of the roots and the foundation from like a financial stability standpoint. So I think it's important to have multiple streams of revenue for the purpose of what you said, like if things like COVID happen. But I also feel and know that, our time and money are related. Money is just the physical form of us combining what's valuable with a lot of time, and eventually it materializes. So it's really about being able to leverage our time and create either more time or more money, because we all have 24 hours a day. And in order for us to go beyond the 24 hours and really create something bigger for ourselves so that we can really do what we're really meant to do. Like, can you imagine never having to worry about finances and just being able to help as many people as possible? That's the ultimate goal. So it's just a means. And so if we can really create that, for ourselves, I think that it puts us in a position where we can like help each other more. I guess I kind of lost my thought, but it almost seems like it's the logical thing to do, is to get your stuff straight first, create yourself a foundation where you're stable so that money isn't a factor in what you really have to do. I don't think that we need to create multiple revenue streams if we're motivated just to make lots of money. It's like we're doing that so that we can go off and actually do what we really need to focus on. And that's why it's important for us to create revenue streams.
Yeah, we're not here to spend the best years of our lives making just enough to get by while building someone else's wealth. We're here to get money out of the way as an issue so we can live on purpose. We can share our gifts. We can make Absolutely. The world a better place. And, normally either people
and it's also feeding the economy, right? I mean, it's good for the economy as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, most people either have a lot of time and no money, or a lot of money and no time. So true wealth is having financial freedom and time freedom together, which is awesome. So this might be the hardest question that I've asked. When you look back at your life or your career, what is the biggest mistake that you've made, and what did you learn from it? And on the other end of it, what is the smartest thing that you think you've done, and that maybe we can duplicate that?
Okay. So the greatest mistake, which ended up being the greatest mistake, obviously, because with every mistake, I've discovered something that's allowed me to create something bigger. I would have to say, based on at the top of my head. So like maybe after this conversation, like, oh, maybe that was another mistake. But right now, what comes to me, as soon as you said that, I would say is the greatest mistake I made was being naive with trusting everyone and anyone. There was a point in my life where I had to learn what boundaries was, and that not everyone is maybe as clear as you, or, not everyone that you're connecting with really has the same intention in mind. And so I had to learn, because of that and what had happened, I had to learn communication on a different level. I had to, as a result of that, I also got even more clear on my core values, what I stand for, my expectations when it comes to co-creation or collaboration. I had to understand boundaries and the importance of really, staying true to them. So that was the positive result of the mistake I made of just not having healthy boundaries, ultimately. That's what I would say. I took self-love to a whole other level where it was like love and accept everything. But it's like, what I realize is that love is infinite, and you can still be loving and still create boundaries around your time and your energy, or your physical space.
Yeah. So normally the biggest mistake leads to the biggest lesson that you've learned, right? And do you have something that you would say is the smartest thing that you've done? Maybe not going and getting that regular job, but trusting your instincts. I don't want to give you what your smartest thing
Yeah.
you've done is, but go ahead.
I was actually going to say that exactly that is the best decision I've ever made in my life, or the best thing I've ever done in the area of just like career and purpose is never responding to ego. I never made choices out of ego. I never chased money. I never chased what I should do. I genuinely just followed my heart, and it was a combination of what am I passionate about, what do I stand for, and what are my strengths. And so there was a lot of courage involved in my decision making that I know was relative to a lot of people my age. You know, I've been able to experience and create things at a rapid rate because of that. And I really think it's because my parents never really put pressure. Like I came home, graduated from university, and I'm Italian, so I call my mama. And I was stepping out of the house. She's like, "Where are you going?" And this was after I had graduated and came home. I'm like, "Oh, I got a job at Good Life. I'm gonna go work at Good Life." She's like, "Okay." Like she just, there was no really no push about what I should be or had to be. So the best decision was literally following my heart on that. And it I never really was fully clear on how big it would be, and I never would have imagined that I'd be where I am today. But I'm not surprised because it was never driven from the wrong place, from like an ego desire or a selfish place, and that's something I can definitely say is important.
So we are surprisingly more than halfway through the year. So what what is your vision for the rest of 2020? And do you have any specific goals that you've set for yourself to get you out of bed excited in the morning?
Absolutely. So what gets me excited out of bed every morning
You
is my
just lit
meditation.
up, so you got something real that's
Yeah.
going on
Yeah.
there.
So yeah, definitely. So 4 years ago, I actually wrote a book, and I only started to take the publishing process more seriously in the past year. And so I'm just about, 3 or 4 weeks away from getting that started. So at the end this year, I will have my first book published. So I'm really excited about that. I'm going through an expansion process with my online platform, where I'm taking it outside of the community, and I've invested in a mentor to help me with that. So I'm really excited about what I'm launching for that. And, initially before COVID, the goal was to travel more. And so I'm hoping, based on the conditions, that I'll be able to get a lot more traveling, but I'm not sure what things are looking like, but that's definitely another one. But really yeah, my book and the expansion of new things that are going to be launching um, for the Journey to Rise program. So
That sounds like a great year. Now, what advice would you give your younger self? So if you could go back to baby Rosa and give some advice with everything that you've experienced now, everything you know, what advice would you give your younger self to help you along the way?
hmm, I would. Oh, how many points can I give myself? Because two things came to me.
You whatever you want.
Okay.
You have the platform. It's all you.
So what I would say is advice that I would give myself. I would have liked to have gotten in more into investment and really looking at how to compound my money a lot earlier, because I could have a lot earlier. But I actually, because of my upbringing, never really, I did well for myself, but kind of like paid off my exes like debts, and just kind of didn't really think of investments. And so, I could have started maybe 5 years earlier, not really having a true intention and working towards financial freedom.
So have
Uh,
your money making money is what you're
have my
looking
money making money. So I would have gone on that train way earlier. So, I'm on that train. There's a true appreciation for what that takes. And I'm becoming quite passionate about it. And I think it's something that a lot of people need. And so, um, you know, luckily for myself, straight out of university, by the time I was 25, I made my first six-figure income at Good Life. So I did very well. It was just no sense of what to do with it. Like I bought a
at.
place, and but then I, got a BMW. Like there was no need for that, and I just went through a phase of not like it just was what was available. So definitely in getting into investments as soon as possible.
That's where that financial literacy comes into place, and the books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, for sure. And then the boundaries, that big lesson I learned, is to really trust my intuition, and just learn discernment. I think that's really important. Just wanting to please many people and really take the time to help people. But, sometimes when you're clear, it's just important to really trust in your own in your own journey. And so I really think that the boundary thing, the lack of understanding what boundaries were, and I've understood why I didn't have them, later on after the lesson. It really helped me. Learning this really helped me to catapult my success on a whole other level. I don't know if you ever read the book 10X.
Yeah.
But like
Grant Cardone.
Yeah, it 10X'd my whole life. I realized how much time and energy I was putting towards, just as an empath, towards taking on things that weren't mine or that I didn't need to. And, but there's benefits to having gone through that. But definitely my younger self, I would definitely teach myself discernment and financial literacy so that I would start earlier.
It's all a part of the journey. I mean, everything that happened led to where you are now, and you're in a good space. So you don't want to change the past, but I just like the question because it's good advice for, people on the call. Maybe there's like a 17-year-old or a 22-year-old, and they're actually going to take that advice now and run with it long before we figured it out. So as we wrap up the call, where can our listeners find you online? Is there a website? Are there social media pages? If people want to reach out to you for more information about the different things that you do, how can they reach out to you?
You can find me on my website at iamrosarago.com, and Instagram and Facebook, at I am Rosa Rago. That would be the best way for you to find information and just find my page.
Perfect. All right. Well, that was an awesome call. You gave a ton of advice, a ton of value. I was taking lots of notes. I learned a lot. So thank you.
Great questions, by the way. One of the best interviews I've been to.
Wow.
Yeah, great questions. Great questions.
Amazing. Well, thank you. So that was Rosa, everybody. Go check her out, her website, her social media presence. And thank you, Rosa, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joel.
You're very welcome. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next call. Take care. Bye.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'd love to hear from you guys. My goal is to grow this podcast organically, where you're giving me feedback on topics you'd like me to cover and guests you'd like me to interview. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel, and on Twitter at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.